Good morning, everybody. So it's like fall for real, right? We doing the pumpkin spice stuff yet? Yes? No? Okay, not into it. You know, if you've not been here when the weather is a little cool, this is a super fancy building, okay? Because we got climate zones here. Now, in the fall, do you see this thing right here? This thing right here, you got one here, and you got one back there too. So in the fall, here's how this works. If you sit up front, it's Miami. If you sit in the middle, it's Columbus. If you sit towards the back, it's Miami again. There's no middle ground, okay? Now, once it gets to December, when you sit here, it's Columbus. And when you sit there, it's Siberia. And if you sit there, it's Columbus, okay? So in the wintertime, wear a jacket. You just have to praise extra loud, okay, to bring that Holy Spirit fire, because we don't have a furnace, okay? We all right? All right. And if you like tropical, we have a rainforest room over here where the roof really leaks, okay? So I want to talk a little bit this morning about traditions. Do you have traditions in your family? Of course you do. We all have traditions. And we have two major holidays coming up, and these holidays bring out some of our family traditions. And a lot of us share a lot of the same traditions, but there are some unique takes on traditions even within our larger group. So example, we all live in Ohio, right? So even Thanksgiving amongst people in Ohio can look a little different, all right? And specifically, if you think about the menu at your table, have you ever discussed your Thanksgiving menu at work and people were kind of surprised by what you had on your menu? Has this ever happened to you before? Okay, a couple years, I work in healthcare, right? And I love working in healthcare. You get all sorts of different people. And I remember a couple years ago talking about my Thanksgiving menu, and some of my friends at work were surprised and wanted to know what cranberry sauce was and why the heck would you want to have that at Thanksgiving? And what is this green bean casserole? And then I was a little confused by potato salad at Thanksgiving because I thought that was for a picnic, right? And baked beans, I didn't know that was a thing. And then someone else was having chicken curry. And so we were all kind of like discussing this and very curious, but here's what happened. Everybody, after Thanksgiving, brought some of their leftovers in, and we enjoyed to experience the different foods that people had at their table, right? So we were able to kind of combine our traditions and appreciate each other around everybody's upbringing and their culture, and it was a really beautiful thing. And this happens all the time with traditions, right? When we get to know people, we discover there's things that they do differently than we do, but they're all beautiful. And you see this in weddings, right? Everybody's been to a wedding? How many people been to more than 3 weddings? Has anybody here ever officiated a wedding? Okay. And you know that when you've been to a couple weddings, they're all a little bit different. And funerals are the same. Baptisms are the same. Birthdays are the same. We all do them a little bit different. And you find this even in the church. Because the church has different traditions. And some of these traditions can seem maybe a little weird or different or unique until you take the time to really understand why. For example, communion. Have you been to a church that has communion? Of course you have. Have you been to another church that does communion a different way? Yes. So different churches do communion in different ways, and baptism is the same. Some churches you go to, it's just a sprinkling, and it's a baby, right? If you come to Altar Church, we take out this big portable baptismal, and we fill it with water, and we get water everywhere because people take them in, we take them out, there's water going. But sometimes people can't get in the baptismal, so we get a big old towel and get it as wet as we can, and we just saturate them while they stand outside. And have you seen that before? It's beautiful. It's incredible. So baptism and communion, but even something like a sermon. I have a friend of mine is a pastor, and he told me, I never heard this before, he told me about his church and the church he grew up in. There was something called the church finger. Have you heard of the church finger before? And my friend said, in my church, when I'm preaching, if people need to excuse themselves, they will just raise their finger. And he says, but enough people raise their finger, I know it's time for the sermon to stop. We're not doing that. I don't care. I truly do not care. I'm the pastor. God gave me the message. You give me the finger, I'll give you the... should think more about that. In other churches, and other traditions, I think the Mennonite church is like this. The sermon is more like a conversation where the preacher will be preaching, but if you want to ask a question or you disagree, you'll stand up and say, hey, wait a minute. And we're not going to do that either. If you got a question, it's jlopez@alteredmovement.com. jlopez@alteredmovement.com. That's where your complaints are going to go. Amen? Now raise your hand, because I think this is another tradition in church. It can seem weird or confusing. Raise your hand if you have ever heard that in many church traditions, foot washing is a part of the church practice and ceremony. You've heard this before? Foot washing is part of the... Okay. All right. That seems a little interesting. A little interesting. How unlikely would it be for you to come to church knowing that you would be washing someone else's feet? Or, and I think this part is the even more difficult part, that someone will be washing your feet. Would it make it more unlikely? I'm kind of looking at your faces. Would it make it more unlikely that you would come to church? Let's talk about feet. You know, I don't like socks. These shoes are not allowed in my bedroom. They're my favorite. Look, I love these. You probably smell them. I'm sorry. These are my favorite. I just don't like socks. And it's not because I can't find matching socks. I can't. I mean, we got a sock. Who's got a sock bucket? We've got 10 people in our house. We got 4 sock buckets. So I can find socks. I just don't like them. My feet, you know, they can use your imagination. But beyond that, you know, even if you wore socks, when you take your socks off, you ever take your socks off and you see the lint in between your toes? And again, I work in healthcare, so sometimes you take people's socks off for them, and like all the skin cells kind of fly up in the air. Have you seen that? Okay. And you got bunions and thick toenails sometimes. And sometimes as you get older, your toes get a little gnarly and crooked. Who's ready for lunch? We're having a meal after church. Feet. Why do people in the church wash each other's feet? Now, you know it's going to have something to do with Jesus, right? It's going to have something to do with Jesus. And I want to help you understand this morning. So I want you to use your imagination. I want you to imagine yourself walking through an ancient city, a very busy ancient city. And some of the roads are made of stone. You're walking through an ancient city. Let's say it's 32 AD. You're walking through Jerusalem. And, of course, Jerusalem has been Hellenized. There's roads in parts of Jerusalem. But side streets don't have roads. Side streets are made out of dirt, compacted dirt, baked soil, full of dust and debris. And you have merchants, and they're hauling their carts and their loads with horses or donkeys. You know what they're doing. And farmers are taking their livestock to the market on these roads. And there's carriages and there's chariots. So there's urine and spit and blood and waste and water. Fishermen taking their fish to the market, seawater, fish guts, wine, oil, dirt, mud. This is where you walk. This is how you get to where you're going. And your feet are covered and protected only by sandals. So what do your feet look like at the end of the day when you get to where you're going and you're ready to settle down? What do your feet look like? Are your feet clean? Would you put them up on your couch or your chair? The thing is, you don't have running water. You can't take a bath or a shower. The water you bring into your house comes from a cistern. And so when you get to your house, you're going to sit on your little stool and you're going to get a basin and a towel and you're going to wash your own feet. And it's important to understand that if you come home and you're a hard-working person and you've been out all day, your feet are not going to be washed by your children. Your feet are not going to be washed by your wife. Your feet are not going to be washed by your husband. You're going to wash your own feet. You stepped in it, you're going to clean it. Unless you could afford a servant who would wash your feet. Now, only the people of the highest classes could afford a servant. So everyone else just had to wash their own feet. And to be a servant and to wash someone else's feet is a disgusting job. So the only people who are going to do it are the people who are paid to do it. But maybe you can. 11:30, bro, you're right. Did you know a train comes at 11:30? Well, it's 11:24. But every Sunday, right? Like clockwork. And so maybe if you were wealthy enough and you came home, you could have somebody wash your feet, but most couldn't. Most couldn't do that. But let's say you were going to a dinner party, a fancy dinner party with all of your friends. At a dinner party, it's much more likely, if the host is paying attention and conscientious, that there would be at this party a servant to take care of the guests. So if you're going to a party or a banquet, what you could expect is that your friend would hire a servant for the party and all of you would have your feet washed. And if you're just a normal, common person, that would feel very exciting to you. It would feel like, have you ever gone to a party that's like a little too fancy for you? Have you ever had a dinner where you got a little bit dressed up because you knew that it was going to be a restaurant that you normally don't go to? Right? Where you're going to have to Google how to pronounce the words on the menu. And the prices weren't even on the menu. You ever been to a place like that where the prices aren't on the menu? You're like, oh, Lord. So you're planning to go to a banquet. And you're thinking, you know what? I bet they're going to have a servant to wash my feet. And I never had my feet washed before, so this is going to be really exciting. That's going to feel good. Maybe like going to the spa. Who loves the spa? You like the spa? It feels good to go to the spa. So you're looking forward to your dinner party. A dinner party you're going to have with 12 of your friends. And you're going to go to this special ceremony, a night of tradition and history. You're going to celebrate the Passover. And that's really special, for sure. But maybe, again, since you're all getting together and it's a special night, there's going to be a servant there. And maybe you never had your feet washed before, but tonight's the night. It would be nice to get your feet washed because you're a hardworking person. It would be nice to have a servant that could take care of you for once. But as you walk into the door of this party, all you see is your 11 friends and your teacher, Jesus. And as you walk in the door, you see that familiar stool, bench, and the basin, and the towel. And you do what you always do. You wash your own feet. Can you imagine this with me? This is the scene if you are, let's say, the Apostle Peter. Y'all get to be Peter for a minute. Y'all get to be Peter. And you are joining Jesus and your 12 friends, or your 11 friends, for a dinner party. And we today call this party the Last Supper. Now you, all of you, since you're Peter, you don't know it's going to be called the Last Supper. You didn't know that Jesus was going to be betrayed by one of the people in the room. Jesus was going to be betrayed by one of your friends. You didn't know that Jesus was going to be arrested and executed. You just thought that you were going to have a dinner party with your buddies, hoping there might be a servant to take care of your feet. And this is where things at this party start to get a little bit weird, because dinner is just getting started, and here's what Jesus does. This is what Jesus does. Let's read what your friend John wrote, because your friend John, he liked to write, and here's what he wrote. Jesus got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, he took off his tunic, wrapped a towel around his waist, and after that he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. What is happening? First of all, dinner has already started, so your feet have already been cleaned. Why is he doing this? And second, you came to this party expecting and hoping for a servant to take care of you, but you didn't expect Jesus, the literal Son of God, to be that servant. And this is unacceptable. Because the only people who wash feet are you when you're washing your own feet, or the lowly house servant. Jesus is not the house servant. Yet there he is. He's taking off his cloak and he's wrapping a towel around his waist to wash his feet. And you can't believe this is happening. You can't believe people are letting this go on because he's washing all these feet and no one's even saying anything. And why would you let Jesus humiliate himself like this? Maybe he doesn't know any better. Jesus is just so nice. Maybe he doesn't know what he's doing. And so now it's your turn, and you anxiously look at Jesus, and you're not going to have it. Lord, are you really going to wash my feet? And here's what Jesus says to you. You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand. But you can't stand the idea that Jesus would do this, and so you tell him, no! You shall never wash my feet. And you're saying this in one hand to protect Jesus, but in the other hand, it's because of pride, right? I will not allow myself to be vulnerable to you, Jesus. That is not for you. That is for somebody else. But Jesus says back to you, Peter, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. You were hoping for a servant, but you weren't expecting Jesus to be that servant. And he's telling you, unless you allow me to do this, then we can't be connected relationally. Unless I wash you, I don't know you. And we are not connected. You are not one of mine. And now once you hear this, you relent and you let Jesus wash your feet, You don't understand it. But Jesus insisted that this was a condition of knowing him. And so you don't push back. You don't push back. But why? Why does Jesus insist on doing this? Now let's get in the moment, in the presence. I'm going to release you from being Peter. You can be yourself again. So we can ask, why did Jesus insist on doing this? Well, we know it wasn't to clean dirt off of people's feet. It wasn't about their feet being dirty. The way that dinner worked in the ancient Near East, you're not at a table, right? You're reclining in a circle with your food in front of you. And if you're reclining in a circle, what is just above your head? Someone else's feet. And where are your feet? Near someone else's head? Right? Can you imagine? You're in a circle, reclining. Okay. So certainly as you walked into that dinner party, you would have washed your feet already. Their feet were already clean. Dinner had already started. So Jesus wasn't washing dirt off their feet. Now Jesus, if wanted to, could have cleaned their feet when they arrived, right? You walk in, and if you're Peter, you walk in, you see the basin. Jesus could have been standing there to greet them, to wash their feet. He didn't do that. Because I don't think Jesus wanted his disciples to believe that this was about dirt. It's not about dirt. He cleans their feet when they look clean because he's showing them that he's showing them that he, the Son of God in the flesh, the divine presence on earth, is also a servant who cleans, purifies, restores, gives grace and hospitality and care in dark places that have the appearance of being in order. Jesus is the servant bringing renewal to places that we can't find or see or identify. Jesus is the servant washing and cleansing parts of us that are too covered and calloused and mangled for us to heal. Ultimately, what Jesus is showing them, and they won't see this until later, is that his death and resurrection is an act of the servant. His death and resurrection is an act of the servant king to wash and cleanse and refresh to such a degree that it brings new life. Because it introduces a sacrificial love and care that the world has never seen. So what Jesus is saying is, I'm washing your feet because I love you enough to stoop low. And my death on the cross is the same. I am a servant dying for you to prove that love is the only power that can push back evil. And resurrection is the proof that sacrificial love creates new life even in the face of the greatest darkness. Jesus is saying, if I can lay it all down even my own life willingly for your good, then this is not death. It is a new creation of beauty in the face of hostility and oppression and brutality, because love in the face of death is the only thing that disarms death. It takes the power away and creates something new. Now, what's interesting is that after Jesus' death and resurrection on Easter Sunday, he doesn't say to his followers, okay, your turn. Okay, I've died and been crucified and I've risen. Now you got to go do the same thing. If you're going to follow me, you need to literally die. Don't worry, I'll bring you back. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say, I need you to show me how real you are by being crucified. He doesn't say, I need you to prove to me how tough you are. He doesn't say, it's your turn. Go get yourself crucified. I'll raise you back up. Don't worry. Let's test that faith. Come on, show me what a good and faithful follower you are. He doesn't do that. He doesn't do that because the death and resurrection part, that belongs to him. That belongs to him. But he does ask us to do something a little bit like death and resurrection. He asks us to wash each other's feet. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set an example so that you should do as I have done for you. This command is a little model of death and resurrection, because it asks all of us to humble ourselves, to wash and serve and stoop really low. But it also asks us to humble ourselves and allow ourselves to be washed and served by others. And there's a vulnerability here. There is a death of ego. You want to know how you follow Jesus? You kill your ego. You want to follow Jesus? It's got to be all about him and all about the other. To wash somebody's feet and have your own feet washed, that's a death. But also a resurrection in faith and trust and partnership. Because if you can lower yourself to wash somebody else's feet, and you can allow somebody to wash your feet, do you know what that builds? That builds community. That builds relationships that don't die. It's a vulnerability and a trust and a love that endures and comes from heaven. That's why Jesus did it. If you can do this, it'll keep us together. You know what's really interesting about church in North America, especially America? We treat church like we treat fast food. we become consumers. And a lot of us will stay together until we find ourselves frustrated. And then we just break relationship. But what if we made it a practice of washing each other's feet? What if we spent time stooped low with a basin of water and a towel? Washing and receiving. We do this, it reminds us of the humility of King Jesus, who would take on the role of the lowest servant while saying, unless I wash you, unless you allow me to serve you in this way, you can't know me. You can't, because this is who I am. It's my DNA. It's why I came from heaven. And unless the church has the same heart of service for each other, vulnerability, the willingness to draw close, the willingness to listen, the willingness to mend, the willingness to walk into the unclean and the disheveled and the broken and the dirty and the unkept, then we are not like Jesus. We're just not. So I have a question. A couple. Would you be willing to wash the feet of the prisoner? Doesn't matter what they did, or guilty or innocent, would you wash their feet? Would you be willing to wash the feet of the homeless or the sick or the dying? Would you be willing to wash the feet of your enemy? You know, Judas was there, right? Judas got his feet washed by Jesus. Think about that. Jesus is washing Judas's feet, knowing that Judas would be the reason that Jesus would have nails in his feet. Did Jesus think of his own feet when he was washing Judas's? Would you be willing to wash the feet of the racist or the rapist or your alcoholic father or abusive mother? Would you be willing to wash the feet of the kids that work at Taco Bell? Or your neighbor you can't tolerate because he's always on the homeowners association page talking about fireworks? How about the immigrant? Or your boss, or the guy who drives too close, your mother-in-law? I want you to think of the labels that we give each other. Left, or right, or Marxist, or MAGA, or legal, or illegal, or old, or young, or man, or woman, or Gen X, or millennial, or boomer. And I'm going to tell you, as times have changed, the labels have changed. But we always call each other something as we scapegoat and other and isolate. And yet God only calls us by one name. Children. And he commands us, dear children, to discover each other's dignity. I want you to wash each other's feet. Because what happens is, when I'm washing your feet, and I'm washing your feet, and I'm washing yours, and I'm washing yours, as I scrub your feet, I'm washing away the label. And what I'm seeing is the feet of a child. Not my child, but his. And maybe they're wrong, and maybe they're ugly, and maybe they're brutal, and maybe it's not fair, but maybe when I wash their feet, they're gonna know who Jesus is because they see him right here. And maybe that changes everything. Could you do it? Specifically knowing that to wash those feet implies that you are being in the place of a servant and you're giving them the place of honor. Could you do it? Jesus did. Would you wash the feet of the person next to you in church? Would you let them wash yours? Is it insecurity that makes you say no? Some of y'all get nervous. Don't get nervous. Is it pride? A fear of vulnerability, a fear of being loved, a fear of being known, a fear of getting a little too close to the Jesus ethic? Would you say to your neighbor, you'll never wash my feet. You'll never wash my feet. And if you say that, do you understand that you are denying that person the privilege of being like Jesus? You're denying them the ability to be loved by you. Now, I'm not going to embarrass you guys by asking everybody to start washing your feet. I'm not going to do that. Some people are getting a little nervous. Why did I come to this church today? The pastor isn't wearing any shoes. I see what's going on here. But I am going to ask you this question, and I'm going to need some water, and I'm going to need those basins. Paging the kitchen. I have the privilege and honor of being able to stand up and say, follow me as I follow Christ. That's what Paul said. I get the honor of pastoring a church. You have no idea what an honor that is. And what I want to be is a man who walks in humility and shows people what love in the flesh looks like. And I do it so imperfectly because I'm so broken. But the question I'm going to ask you is, if there's anybody here who loves me enough and will honor me enough to let me wash your feet.